welcome Julian Glover. It's so nice to have you. Well, thank you for being here. This is quite an honor. You've been in everything I love, from Avengers to Quartermass but I got to ask you right off that, I don't know if you saw or knew what the clip I showed. I showed a clip from Game of Thrones with you and Tywin down by the sea, by the river, and you actually tip your hand and show that Grandmaster Pycelle is not as dumb as...
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
That scene is not in the series.
I know. Why is it not in the series? It tips so much.
Well, you opened a big door to start off with, straight away. First of all, the idea of me being not the doddering fool that people think I am was my idea. I did about a week on it, on the series, and I'm sitting at the end of the table farting, and making inane remarks, and people being sarcastic about me and all that. I got fed up with that, and I thought, this is no good for several series. I made 8 series in the end, which is wonderful. Anyway, so I went to the writer and said, I've got this idea that he's not that, he's hiding it all. That's why he survives all this time. Because they think he's not really worth getting rid of, really. A bit of old rubbish. And they said, this is a very good idea, so we'll give you a scene. And they did indeed give me a scene in episode 3, was it? I can't remember which. In which I'm discovered having just got out of bed with a young girl, and she goes, and I then stretch up. Go to the door, go down like this, and open the door and go out. That established the fact that I was, pretending all the time. I'm an old fool, but I'm a better old fool than they think. Okay, so then the series went on and on and on and on, and they needed a reminder, and it was people, you viewers, of the fact that I was not as I seemed to be. So they wrote this scene in, which obviously you've just seen, which was absolutely perfect for me. It was the right time in the series for people to be reminded, oh yes, okay, yeah, we get that. And Tywin accepts that. Rather grudgingly. It still makes me carry the fish in, but he accepts that as a fact and doesn't mind about it. And the fact that they cut it made me completely angry. Angry is a very small word for what I actually felt. Right? And I've given myself to this bloody series for all this time, and they cut this really important scene, and I went and complained, of course, it was too late. And they said, well, it was for time and all that. I said, but there were lots of things in that episode you could have cut. This scene is very short, but it completely explains what I am. And so they said, well, we're terribly sorry, but that's the way it goes. So, when we get to series 7, at the end of it, I say, I don't want to do any more. And they say, you've got to do more. I said, I don't. I'm no guarantee to you at all. Mind you, having said this, we're all very great friends, so I could do it comfortably. And I said, I'm not going to do it. And they said, well, we want you with this wonderful scene we've got for you. Oh, is there? Thank you very much. Can I see the scene, please? No, you can't see the scene. That's what they do now. They won't let you tell anybody anything about what's coming up. I said, well, if you won't let me see the scene, goodbye. I won't be seeing it in the last series. So eventually, a man came to my front door on a motorbike with a locked box, would you believe? I brought it in and said, will you read it now, and then I'll take it away, because I can't leave it. Christ. So I read it, and of course, it was my death scene, which is absolutely terrific. The irony of the death scene being, I'm sure a lot of you spotted it, that I'm the oldest man in the series, and I'm killed by a lot of children. And that was absolutely brilliant. And I was thrilled with that. So I then did that last series. I did it on 2 conditions. One, that I could do it after the contract had ended and in my own time. In other words, I gave them all the dates I was free. They could choose one of those days, but I wouldn't do it when they wanted me to do it if it couldn't coincide. And the other was that they tripled my salary for that episode. And within 7 minutes, my agent was back saying, "You're done. That's it." So the moral of that story is, if you really don't want something, you'll probably get it.
So thanks for clearing that up. Because when I saw that scene, it was riveting. I was like, "Are you sure this is deleted?" Because it was. So it was. But I'm so glad that it all turned around. So before we get to questions, I have a question you probably don't get asked a lot. You're half brothers with Robert Wyatt. Were you guys close growing up, or did you have any interest in music?
How do you find that out?
I'm a huge Soft Machine fan.
Oh, Robert Wyatt, have you ever heard of him? You probably haven't. He founded this group called Soft Machine, for reasons best known to himself. And when that group closed down, they formed another one, because they were very popular in the continent. They formed another one called Machine Molle, which means the same thing in French, I'm sure you all know. Yes, we were very close. Different father, of course, but that didn't matter. And you know he broke his back. Yeah. He's still with us. He's not very well. Very long beard. Funnily enough, when I was playing King Lear in London, at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, he was also in town. And they did quite by coincidence, they did an interview with me and an interview with Robert with a photograph, and they were published on consecutive days, and we were both with this great big long beards. He, of course, had a real one. Mine was stick-on. A bloody great nuisance when you wanted to eat your lunch.
But thanks for.
But Robert is a very fine man, a very fine musician, and very bright on top, but has a wonderful basic childishness about him, which is very attractive, especially to me. Plus, and he still owes me £10.
Well, plus an absolutely beautiful voice.
Isn't it lovely?
It is.
Yeah.
It's unlike. You should check this out. His voice is like unlike anything else in rock and roll. It's lilting. Well, let's get back to you guys. You don't want to hear about this. Let's get some questions from the audience. Thank you for talking about that, because that's a very dear thing to me.
What was it like to work on Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, and who was your favorite person to work with on Game of Thrones?
Indiana Jones. Oh, thank you.
What was it like? I never know quite how to answer that pleasure, except it was a pleasure. Answer that question, I mean. Well, because I was there with somebody called Harrison Ford and another person called Sean Connery. You know, what's wrong about that? You might sort of, that's the end of life, really, isn't it? And a brilliant director, and a fantastic part. I'd have done it. I'd have paid to do it. It was the first time I was ever paid a decent salary on a film, and I was very happy to do that. Sean I'd known for a very long time. I think I did. Well, I did a television series with him in the 60s, when it was a Shakespeare series, which the BBC did. Shakespeare wrote, I hope I don't sound patronising, a series of historical plays about England. They're called the history plays. And in those history plays, we did them in 50-minute episodes, like a soap, every Thursday, and everybody stayed in to watch. It was a very brave thing to do. And in that, I played, well, it doesn't matter, one of the kings. And that was my first big, after 3 seasons at Stratford-on-Avon, you can see where I'm heading, that was my first big experience of doing Shakespeare, which has been the great love of my life. I've been in all of his plays except 4 now of Shakespeare. I can't remember how I started this. What was the question?
It was about Indiana Jones.
What?
It was about Indiana Jones.
No, who was my favorite person in
Game of
Thrones? You mean character or actor? Well, I think my favorite... Actually, they're both the same. was oh Christ, Tyrion. Little, yes, brilliant actor, absolutely brilliant actor. And in my humble opinion, which is what you've come here for, isn't it? He should have been the one at the end. He should have been sitting on that throne with his legs dangling over the end. And I thought that the end was a cop-out, frankly, absolute cop-out. It was so obvious. So I have some people who agree, but lots who don't, I'm sure. I was also very friendly with Charles Dance, who played Tywin. Fine actor. We first met in 1959 at the Royal Shakespeare Company when he was my understudy. Time brings in its revenges. There's a gentleman at the back here.
All right, hello, Julian. Wonderful to have you with us today.
He said it was nice.
Yeah, thank you. It's very nice for me too.
You're welcome. So this is a two-part question for you. What was it like to voice Aragog the Spider in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets? And also, considering where you're at right now, which moment do you look back on as the one you're the most proud of, and why?
The first question was, and the second one was, what was that? I'm sorry, the most role, your favorite role of all time? A favorite moment of acting of all time. Yeah, I know. We've got a lot of time.
The last scene of King Lear, but you're so glad to get it done. No, I enjoyed that. My favorite character part in a film was in Indiana Jones. No question. It was such a wonderful part, such a wonderful atmosphere on the whole thing. We all knew we were into a really good one, and we all felt that it was the best of the Indiana Jones so far, and it's going to go on being the best of the Indiana Jones. And working with those two men was such a pleasure. Really working with the grown-ups, and the story was silly and good, believable. The girl was a sweet girl, relatively unknown, in fact, very unknown at the time. And we went to nice locations, and so it was a very pleasurable experience, that film. I think my most pleasurable moments have been in the theatre, because I am primarily a theatre actor, and my extraordinary good fortune in being in these big franchise films after I left Stratford has been a blessing to me. It means I can come to Pittsburgh and talk to you people and earn some money. And but in my old age, that's rather an important factor, because the parts, of course, run out when you get old. So how many very old men are there in any good drama you see? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe a man and a woman. But, and usually somebody else gets those parts too. So so I do a lot of these. I've generally had a very fortunate career, because I've become someone who's known. I'm recognized in the streets, but not mobbed. I'm not a star. And I'm glad about that, except for the money. It always comes down to that, doesn't it, in the end? I've had two very good marriages, my second one being for 54 years and will last my life. And I've got a wonderful son and two gorgeous grandchildren. And my work has been consistently throughout my career, good, sometimes bad, sometimes stuff I'm ashamed of, sometimes stuff I'm proud of. But it's been pretty consistent, and I've earned a respectable living for the whole of my life. Well, what more can you ask of a life? And I'm 87 and still at it. So I'm grateful to whoever it is up there. So that's a short answer to your question.
Excellent. Let's grab it. We're going to get another question here.
Yeah. Who was the most ruthless villain you played? Aris Kristatos, General Veers, or Walter Donovan? And I have one thing to say to you. You have chosen poorly.
That answers your question, doesn't it? The most ruthless. Well, you see, I quarrel with you to start with. Aris Christatos needed money because he was training up this young skater for the Olympics. Not sexually involved with her, nothing nasty about that. He needed money, and he backed the wrong side to get money. It's as simple as that. Ruthless, well, yes, he was a bit. He didn't mind people drowning a bit. But apart from that, he was a very successful businessman who had fought in the resistance during the war and on the side of the Allies, and he was an okay bloke. I mean, the girl quite liked him, but not, I say, not sexually. General Veers is certainly not a villain. Certainly not a villain. General Veers is a very, very efficient soldier. He's a general. He's put in charge of major operations. And the problem with, as far as you're concerned, why you think he's a villain, because he's fighting for the wrong side, the side you don't agree with. Well, I don't know how many of you know your world history, but there was a general in the last World War called General Rommel, in German, who was a fine, fine, fine man. But he fought for the Germans because he was German, and that's what General Veers does. So I won't have that. That he's ruthless. I won't have it. Walter Donovan is a quite different creature. Yes, I think he'd have done anything for that. But then, on the other hand, his reason is... Now, I'm asking you a question now. Who here, what would you do for the secret of eternal life? You'd kill your mother. But that's true. That's true. And what he does is to kill everybody else. Not his mother, as far as I knew. But that's what he was. That was his ambition. So...
I'm sorry. There you go.
Of being a villain. Someone like Hitler. Hitler was a villain. Absolutely no question. He had it in his mind to destroy all these Jews and prostitutes and gay people, and he had it in his mind to do that. He was a villain. He was a twisted man. There's another one going around at the moment called Putin, who knows what's happening, exactly, all his own people getting killed as well, for a piece of land. What is that all about? So there are some people who are born villainous, but I don't play them.
It was pointed out to me that we skipped the Harry Potter question about the...
Louder, what was that again?
There was a question about doing the spider.
Spider in Harry Potter.
Spider. The spider came about through audition. There they were, they had this film, they were going to make this film, and they had a spider in it, and who talked, which is a bit of a problem if you think about it. So they auditioned about 20 of us, including leading figures in the theatre, National Theatre actors, Royal Shakespeare Company actors, until they found something that they thought would work. And it happened that mine was the voice that they thought, yeah, that will do. Because nobody knew what a spider sounded like. And it's interesting that all over the world this Harry Potter is played in different languages. So obviously the German spider is a different sound from the Czechoslovakian spider, or even the Russian spider, except we know what he sounds like. But that's how I got the part of Aragog. And it started off as just being one day's voice work in front of a microphone. And they kept on rewriting it. Different words and different attitudes and things. And so I had to do it about 5 times, which meant I got 5 fees for it, for this recording session. So it turned out very nicely. So thank you. Thanks for asking the question about Aragog, and I apologize for not having done so.
There's one right down the front here. Question for you, nice and loud.
Hi. I had read that you were originally considered for the role of James Bond for Live and Let Die. Did you ever audition, or were you contacted by Cubby Broccoli for the role?
I was considered for it, and I did a test. I didn't meet Cubby then. It was I think there were about 5 of us who did screen tests for it, but we all knew that it was going to go to Roger. It had to. He just finished doing The Saint. He was right up there with all of it. He was gorgeous to look at. A very good performer, very funny. It had to be Roger, and it was, and I'm bloody glad it was. I'd have liked to have played it, yes, wouldn't anybody? It's the sort of thing is a good ambition, and the money's good. But no, I didn't play it, but you're quite right. It's not well known, that, so well spotted. Well spotted.
Right down here, come around with a microphone, nice and loud.
So, when working on Empire Strikes Back, New Hope had finished. They didn't know what they had then. Now they know what they have. What was the feeling like on set, and like the whole process of getting that part? Like, what was that like when working on Empire?
Okay. I'll tell you about getting the part, shall I? It so happened that in my rather nice suburb of London, where I live, an ordinary semi-detached house, my next-door neighbour was someone called Robert Watts. Aficionados among you will know he was the executive producer on the Star Wars films. And he was just my friend over we had drinks together and friend over the garden fence. Very nice chap. He does these now, these conventions now. He's retired. And anyway, one day we were out doing our gardens and over the garden fence, chatting of this and that. And I said, "What are you up to now?" Having finished the first Star Wars film, he said, "We're going to do another one." "Oh, are you? That's exciting." And he talked a bit about it, and then he said, "Do you want to be in it?" Yes, it was really like that. My wife had to come in and pick me up. Anyway, we were out there, and he said, "Well, there is a part I can think of for you, which is it's not a large part, but it's quite important. And if you'd like to do it, come and do it." So I went along, and along with I think 4 other actors, the people who were the other generals and those young actors that we were then, we all did 5 days' work on it. And we earned £200 a day on that. And that was £1,000 for the whole week for doing one of the major films in cinema history. However, the fact that I'm here now means I'm still earning money out of Star Wars. I've made so much more money out of Star Wars at conventions than I did when we made it. This is absolutely true. And so I'm deeply grateful. Star Wars is a remarkable thing, isn't it? It was when they made it, you're all too young to remember, but before then there were things called space films. Who said? Oh, yeah. Well, she's owned up. Well, we knew things called space films, didn't we? And they were pretty rubbish. And suddenly, Star Wars, when it started off with those aeroplanes hurtling through those mountains, and nearly threw you out of your seat, we simply couldn't believe it. It was such a novel concept. And that novelty has stuck with the film, certainly for the first 3 films. The first 3 films were graced with Alec Guinness, which was a great centre for the film. The first 3 films had a sort of moral thing about them, and in my opinion are still the best Star Wars films. The remaining 5 are the other Star Wars films. You can't sort of fault them. They're wonderfully made, tremendously well made, very well performed. The tricks in it and the The special effects are absolutely wonderful, but they don't have that inner something which made those first three so good. And when Harrison was a young man, you know, and there was Alec. Oh, I must tell you about Alec. He was in, after he finished doing his Star Wars film, he was in New York walking down Fifth Avenue, and a woman came along with a little girl of about 12 or something. And, oh, excuse me, Sir Alec, I'm so sorry to trouble you. I know it's not your country and all that, but I must congratulate you. Thank you. And my daughter has seen, we'd love to have your autograph, please. My daughter has seen Star Wars 12 times. And he said, 12 times. He said, I will give you my autograph on the condition that your daughter never sees Star Wars again. Anyway, that's my feeling about Star Wars. It's very interesting coming to these conventions because small children come up to me, 8 years old, 7 years old, who started seeing the Star Wars film, and they absolutely adore them. And old men like me come up to my desk as well, having seen the Star Wars film, and it never stops. There's no stoppages or reduction in the enthusiasm for the Star Wars film. Indiana Jones, which was very successful when it first came out, is still successful. Yes, and it's good to have done it. People have enjoyed the films, and I get quite a lot of attention for that. But that's starting to slip away. And also, Game of Thrones is beginning to slightly slip away, having been at the time when it came out, the number one autograph that people would want would be Game of Thrones. But that's beginning to slip away. So I reckon I'll just about last until those are all gone, except for Star Wars.
Oh, excellent. But yeah, we got a question on this side of the room. Right here, nice and loud. Oh, talk through that mask.
If you couldn't have been an actor, what would you have liked to have been?
An archaeologist.
Like Indiana Jones.
I can't. That's what I was going to be until I discovered acting. And then I knew, I'll quickly tell you about that. I was at school, and I had literary parents who were both journalists. And anyway, because we ran out of money, I had to go to a school in South London, which was at that time free, which used to be what we call a public school. You call public schools the non-fee paying, don't you? What do you call
private school?
Private school. This used to be a private school. The public school system is quite different. Eton and Harrow, those places, for the elite people. The school I went to used to be like that, but was now government-sponsored. Anyway, I was 14 years of age, and in the second year, a young English master who'd only just come from university decided to revive the tradition of playing Shakespeare there, because the school was founded by one of Shakespeare's greatest actors, a man called Edward Alleyn, who made his name by touring. He was a great touring actor, and he made a great deal of money. And to atone for his sins when he reached a certain age, decided to found a school for poor boys in South London. And that school has survived, and that's the one I was at. Okay, it's rather important to tell you that, because the school had that sort of cachet about it. Anyway, this young boy, the young teacher, decided to do Shakespeare. I'd never done any acting at all, ever in my life. Rather a shy little boy, would you believe? And he decided to do a production of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, and he gave me one of the best parts I've ever played in my life, which is called Mark Antony, who was a wonderful, dashing, popular hero figure in ancient Rome, and has become synonymous with that sort of character in our language, in our English language. And I played that, and I went home after that and said, everything has changed. This is what I'm going to do. And fortunately, I had parents who didn't go, oh my God, as a lot of parents do, and quite understandably. They said, okay, that's what you want to do, we'll do what we can to help you do it. So when I left school, I did my national service and then went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and 2 years training, and then started to be an actor. That's how it happened, and it has always been, and I hope I don't sound po-faced or soppy about this, since that moment there's never been any question but that I am an actor. I know that whether you like my work or not, but this is what I was here for. That's the whole point of me being here, which might not interest you, but it certainly interests me. And it's interested my family, who are also theatre people now, and people around me. That has interested them. And so that's another reason. Well, no, I suppose, apart from my wonderfully successful marriage, that is the reason that I know I've had a happy life. So I hope it doesn't sound too po-faced.
Yeah. So I have a quick question. What was your first paying acting job?
Yep, I can remember. It's not very interesting. There's a place on the coast, on the eastern coast of England, called Skegness, which is a very popular holiday resort for factory workers and people up in the north of England. And it also has a holiday camp. Now, holiday camps are quite different in England from what they are here. Over here, they're fantastic. Open air adventure things, aren't they, for young people? Over there, they are simply places where people go and don't have to work anymore, can have enough to drink in the evenings, and there are lots of sort of activities going on, which are good, they're fine, and they do their job. There's also a little theatre. There's a big theatre which does concerts and big musical things, and there's a little theatre which does plays. And I met my first wife. I'm so sorry to bore you. I've done my best. And I met my first wife as we rehearsed 2 plays for that. And it was quite an interesting experience because it was in this holiday camp. And there was the theatre, and it was in a big building. And on one side was the boiler room for the whole of the camp, which was a very, very noisy affair indeed. And on the other side was the staff canteen, which was always filled with screaming staff. So we were in the middle of that, surrounded by these sounds at all time. We'd never play the plays properly because of all that going on. Also, if you overran the play by half a minute, you played to an empty theatre because they always had something else to go to at 10:05. So that was literally true. It would be empty half a minute if you run over. So we made quite sure we didn't run over. So we'd do much too fast. And I'm sure it was terrible, but I did meet my first wife, who was a very fine woman. We're very friendly with her still, who is now a dame of the British Empire, same as her knighthood. And she's a very well-known theatre actress called Eileen Atkins. And she's a very dear person in my life. That's another reason that I'm so lucky, that my 2 families, as it were, get on so well together. And my in-laws were fantastic people. They were both gone now, absolutely lovely people. So I'm not complaining, except to say that if you don't come and buy my autograph, I'll never talk to you again.
We have a question on this side of the room.
Yes, with your vast experience in performing Shakespeare, and I know it's hard to choose because it is a huge just plethora of plays that you have done. What is your favorite or several of your favorite characters you've played in Shakespearean plays?
Characters I played in Shakespeare?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I've done 13 seasons with the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is a large amount of career. And that television series I told you about, which was so brave, in which I played King Edward IV, which is a very nice part. But the best part, I started off as a spear carrier, of course. That's all I was. Or somebody to stand in front of the lights, because I was tall. That's how I started off. But I managed to start building up into small parts and then bigger parts, and finished my first season, 3 seasons there, playing quite nice, good small parts, really noticeable parts. Then I went back again to that theatre 7 years later and started playing leading parts. And my favourite part was the one I was most rewarded for, was a part called King Henry IV, who is a man much afflicted by guilt about the way he's led his life, and he was personally responsible for unseating Richard II, and caused a great deal of discomfort among his people, and spent his whole life in guilt, and eventually died of guilt on the stage before your very eyes. That is certainly my favourite part that I played. It was so demanding, but yet so very rewarding, because you knew that the audience were there with you, absolutely there with you, whatever you were doing. Because he was such an interestingly written character. But Shakespeare was rather used to that, writing interesting characters. And of course, Shakespeare has been the great love of my life ever since, as I said before. And I once played, in the early days, the part of the jailer, which is a small part of Richard II, who extends sympathy to his king, although he knows the king's had it. And of course, you mustn't show sympathy for someone who's had it. And that was a most rewarding 5-minute experience, and another thing which lit the flame again under me. If I can play scenes like this, I'm sure I can play the bigger one. And then, of course, to end up, I joked about it earlier on, but King Lear, which I don't know if you've ever heard of the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It's a reconstruction, exact reconstruction of the Globe Theatre of the 17th century, with all its problems and difficulties, no lighting, no microphones, certainly, a lot of people standing in front of you, shifting from foot to foot, people sitting on very hard seats, and utmost discomfort. But it is one of the most successful theatres in London now. And working there with King Lear, with the audience there, not even as close as you, there was an extraordinary experience, going through this amazing experience that King Lear in his latest years goes through. It was every face, you could see every single face, and you could see whether they were listening or not, and they all were listening. It was simply wonderful. All these people bent forward, watching this old man disintegrate in front of their very eyes. It was a tremendous experience. And but indeed, it was my favourite moment was the last scene of that, when I learnt something about life. At the end of King Lear, he comes on carrying his dead daughter, and puts her down and howls, and he's so unhappy. But there's a wonderful moment when he's lying there, he's nearly gone, and he says, Shakespeare is extraordinary, but he just says, "Pray you undo this button." Now, at that point, obviously it was uncomfortable for him to undo this thing that's uncomfortable wherever the button was. And I've now discovered, I've realized that Shakespeare knew, but I can say, since even you're not old enough, when you get really old, your fingers lose their fingerprints, and your fingers are very slippery, dry, slippery. Even now I find it difficult. Well, this morning it took me about 5 minutes to do these buttons up. You have to wet your fingers, because it slips out. And that's why King Lear says, "Pray you undo this button." How did he know? How did Shakespeare know that that was a thing? He was only 36. It's quite remarkable. Another thing about Shakespeare, I'm going to bore you with now. Prince Charles, our Prince Charles, who was a great Shakespeare freak, came to see the Henry IV plays, what you referred to. And in that, there is the Prince of Wales, the young Prince of Wales, who is the son of my character, Henry IV. And he's a ne'er-do-well. He goes down to the pub all the time, gets pissed, and consorts with the wrong sort of people until suddenly he has to be king because I die, and he completely changes like that, and he becomes a kingly presence and rejects all the people who he was going to the pubs and all that with. Prince Charles came to see that production of it, which I have to say, it wasn't my production, but it was a wonderful production of that play, with a fantastic guy playing Falstaff, the great fat man, and all that. Anyway, and afterwards we were having a drink in the director's office, and he pulled me to one side and said, "Oh, Julian, isn't Shakespeare fantastic?" Yes, yes, I loyally assented. Shakespeare was indeed rather special. He said, "But if you think about it, Julian, there's only ever one Prince of Wales. If he's not Prince of Wales, he's king, or he's Prince of Wales, or he's dead. How did Shakespeare know how he feels?" Think about it. Only one person in the world knows what it feels like to be the Prince of Wales, and it certainly wasn't William Shakespeare. But he knew how the Prince of Wales, every Prince of Wales who's come since then, feels. What the nature of the beast is. Oh, Shakespeare. And how did he write Cleopatra? How do you write Cleopatra if you're not a woman? How do you do it? Shakespeare did it. I'm finished.
Can we do some more questions? Can we do some more questions?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, good, good.
I meant I finished up talking about Shakespeare, unless you ask me a question about Shakespeare.
No, I was going to say there's no substitute for a live performance. There just isn't.
Well,
I mean, a theater is always better than anything else. But I know you've done a lot of films, and I know you've done a lot of theater, and I know you did Aragog for Harry Potter. Have you done any other voiceover work?
No.
Have you considered doing any voiceover work?
Oh, yes.
That's pretty easy money, actually.
Very easy money. I've done quite a lot of dubbing into from a foreign language into English. But we hardly ever do that now in England. It's not like Germany. In Germany, every single English film is translated into German. American films, they're all translated. We don't do that anymore. So I've stopped really doing it. I used to do a lot when I was a young man of voiceover work. Not voiceover work, dubbing work, substitution of language. I was once rather upset. My very first film was a film called Tom Jones, which is a wonderful, you've seen it, have you? Yes, it's a wonderful romp of a film, 17th century story, starring young Albert Finney, and it's filled with terrifically good English actors, and that was my very, 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 very first film of all. And I remember thinking, this is what filming should be, and I'm in on the beginning of my career, and I hope I'll make other films, and it'll be, I hope, as jokey as this. I got onto that, but I did. Wonderful, wonderful experience with that Tom Jones. If you ever see it in some arts cinema, I beg you to see it, because you'll laugh your head off, won't you? I mean, it's so wonderfully ridiculous. The essence of what true farce should be. I was the beginning of my playing of horrible people. I played someone who was horrid to my hero. But I get my comeuppance at the end, of course, like I always do. That's why I can never do sequels. I always get killed. So, are you going to be in the next Star Wars film? No, not a chance.
Did you have any trepidations going from theater into television and film?
No. It sounds... Acting is the same. It comes from the same place. Simply, I'm now talking to you with this, because I'm deaf, and but I'm very grateful to have it. Acting in television used to be for 4 cameras. You used to do them with 4 cameras, And when I started off, no recording. There's no such thing as a televised show being recorded. But fortunately, Age of Kings, the one which I told Shakespeare when I did, that was the beginning of doing recordings. So I do have a recording of that, which is amazing to look at, with all us young aspirant actors thinking we're all so wonderful. And then films. My first film was Tom Jones, and it was delightful because I knew most of the people in it. There was a theatre in London called the Royal Court Theatre, which is an experimental theatre. It's a very, very upmarket experimental theatre. And I met most of the people in the cast of Tom Jones because it was directed by Tony Richardson, who was a director of the Royal Court Theatre. So I knew most of those. And the filming of that was so somehow easy. It's never been so easy as that. Because Tony simply, I said, what do I do, Tony? He said, you just sit there and act. Just be him. Just be him. I don't have to do anything different. No. The camera will catch what we need. And if you're too loud, I'll tell you. And if you're too soft, I'll tell you. Mind you, nobody takes any notice of that rule anymore, do they? You're too soft. Right, you can hardly hear some of these people in films these days. People have conversations in crowded pubs or cafes or restaurants, and they talk to each other like this. But which it would be absolutely impossible in a crowded pub. Because always in pubs you have to speak up, don't you? Always. Last night, I can't remember the experience of the noise that was in the bar at the hotel over the road. I knew we were all bellowing at each other. But so often in films, I love you very much, or I'm going to kill you tomorrow.
So we have time for one more question. Julian, you'll head back to your table, right? And remember, if you don't get an autograph, he won't speak to you ever again. So last question, make it a good one.
Hello, sir. Thank you, first of all, for coming and sharing all of your experience with us, because it's such a spectacular thing for somebody to be able to come and share their personal experiences and to just be a part of a bigger, better thing like this. My question to you today, sir, is...
Yes, sir.
My question to you today, sir, is that over a long and storied career, as you've had spanning decades, which form of performance do you feel is personally most effective for you to be able to apply your craft?
Theatre. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. It's just a quick thing about you saying about theatre being such an immediate experience. That's why King Lear was so exciting. At the beginning of the Second World War, before you joined, all the actors, like everybody, all the leading actors went into the army or the air force or whatever it was. They had to. They were called up. It was mandatory. In 6 months, they were all called back because the government realized that the public could not do without theatre. And actors will get onto a table if they're required to and act if they're proper actors, they're not show-offs. But there are quite a lot of show-offs in our business, but there are more people who are very serious practitioners of the art of acting. What they had to do at the war, in the war, great figures like Laurence Olivier and Michael Redford, Ralph, those great actors all had to go to the war first. They came back, and much to the joy and pleasure of the people of England, because they toured around, they went on being actors and Shakespeare, modern plays and funny plays, and all during the war, and indeed the public were satisfied. And I think these two chaps here have had quite enough of me, so I think I ought to go.
They're getting a head start to get to your table.
Is that what it is?
That is what they're doing. They're getting they want to be first in line to get to your table. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do. Julian Glover. You could do better than that. A theater experience.
Hi, this is Aaron Ashmore, and you are watching Phantom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe like now. Oh, and have fun and follow your fandom.